Okay.
All right. So thank you all for all of those who have joined this particular webinar. I did a session at IIT Kanpur a couple of months ago. And after that, I got a lot of interesting feedback saying, this could be a topic of interest to many, and maybe I should do a webinar at some point in time. And that's exactly the reason why I'm doing this webinar today. Those who are not able to attend this today, maybe we will host this recording in Ecological Society YouTube channel and send you a link for those who are interested. So with this, let me just get started. I think most of you generally know my background, but currently I am a trustee at the Ecological Society and continue to do some independent research on the energy aspects of how things are, aspects related to energy transition, as well as some of the fundamental questions that many of us have not found answers during our careers. So with that, let me get started. So the plan that I have today for quite some time is the following. So I would like to spend good amount of time to set the context in terms of the energy scenario that we have today. I'll follow that up with trying to talk about understanding of our current energy system. We will try and draw some insights based on the data that I intend to present. Many times, data doesn't mean anything if we are unable to interpret it and use it for a particular purpose. So I'm going to spend some time on, what are the insights, therefore, that we will get from, or we do get from this data. Now, having set the context, having defined the problem, having looked at how our energy system looks like, and also having understood, how to interpret some of the data that we see as we go further, I will also talk about what therefore are the opportunities that span. And of course, we will keep talking about the challenges, the constraints, and the speed at which we may need to talk about the scale at which, the challenges and opportunities, challenges are, and therefore opportunities could be. But we will look at the opportunity landscape, and then we will look at the imperatives when we talk about energy transition and associated key aspects. And we'll end this with a quick summary. So that's the plan we have for the next hour and a half. And then, if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to try and answer those questions. So first, I think we need to understand this very well, that our energy and the economy, and it's not just about the country, but for the whole world, they are really tightly coupled, which essentially means that if we somehow remove the energy from the equation, there is no economy. And that is something that we have to understand it in full context, that our economy depends heavily on energy, and of course material that comes with it. I'm using energy as a proxy to energy and material, because even if you have material and if you do not have energy, you are not going to be able to convert that material into what we really want. So for example, you might have iron ore, but you will not, if you do not have crude oil and you do not have earth moving machinery, you are unable to use that iron ore and even pull it out of the ground. Forget about converting into steel. So that is the level of what you say, coupling that we have between energy and economy. And with this as a starting point, let's move forward. Uh, I will talk about three, four things. So one of the important parts that we will talk about is the current development model. We will also talk about the current economic system. We will talk about the social issues, especially related to employment. And of course, one of the most important part is the holistic challenges that we have, the ecology and ecological challenges that we face as such. So let's look at the current development model. So if you look at key indicators of what we call development today, so number one is economic growth. We essentially say that economic growth is a proxy to development, which means that if we grow our economy, then that essentially means that we are developing. Now, while GDP growth or economic growth is a reasonable proxy, it is not really a very good proxy to saying that we have therefore developed. You will see that many countries across the world, for that matter, most countries across the world, and if you track the trends of how GDP has grown and how well-being has grown, I think it is very disproportionate, which essentially means that to deliver equivalent well-being, you actually have to deliver far more economic growth. And that's one of the big challenges related to the way we perceive sustainability and the way we look at how the resources need to be used. Uh, if you really look at economic growth or GDP growth, it comes with a cost. And that cost essentially is using a lot of resources, material resources, energy resources to deliver that economic growth. And we do not really account for this depletion cost in any way as of today. GDP doesn't account for that for sure. It doesn't even account for the externalities, which means, and some of the challenges that we face today is, for example, emissions, pollutions of all kind, whether it is air pollution, whether it is water pollution, or whether it is CO2 pollution, and therefore these issues related to global warming and climate change. So we do not even internalize that, which means that the cost associated with mitigation, if we can do mitigation at all, is not accounted for in economic growth. The cost involved in depletion of material is also not accounted in economic growth or GDP growth. And I think that's important to consider. We have to also understand that there is a cost, and we'll have to keep that in mind when we talk about development. So I just wanted to start this argument with saying that our development model currently, as we see, whether it is in India or most of the world, focuses on GDP growth, and it doesn't really directly focus on development or what I call as well-being. And it might be an interesting way to look at, if we are able to measure well-being in some form or shape, and therefore use those indices instead of GDP or in addition to GDP to look at economic growth and whether it is delivering equivalent well-being. Our current development model is purely based on consumption. If you really listen to any of the investment analysts or any channel on television which talks about economy, it just talks about aspects of consumption. That consumption has slowed down, and therefore our economy is not growing, or a particular case consumption has picked up and therefore our economy is growing. So there is a tight coupling between economic growth and consumption, and we are essentially saying that unless there is increase in consumption, there is no economic growth, and therefore there is no development. And again, when we talk about consumption, the underlying use of natural resources is a given. Use of energy is a given, and externalities that I talked about is also a given. Another component which is also seldom talked about, and many of you, I'm sure, that would say that, yeah, we know that, but it is probably a small component of GDP, but I'll still mention that. So, for example, our economic growth, we will grow our economy if we have more hospitals, which essentially means that we have more sick people, or people who are hoping to recover from, situations which are life-threatening and so on and so forth. We also know that a very, very large part of the spending on healthcare is what I call for last 3, 4, 5 years of life of most of us. And we have to, understand whether we want to spend more on prevention or whether we want to spend more on these kinds of situation where we are looking at, end of life, we are trying to cure something which may not be cured at all and spend most of our money, especially on the healthcare spend, if you look at on some of these aspects. And even otherwise, even the cost of drugs keeps on increasing, whether it delivers equivalent benefits or not has to be looked at. Accidents means that there is GDP growth. You're going to start looking at buying a new car, and therefore there is growth. There is a need for managing natural disasters, which is spent on many pieces of equipment, people's salary, moving around, and so on and so forth. That's also addition to the economy. So I think so. No, these are some of the aspects that we need to look at when we look at our development model. Most of our development today means that build infrastructure. So expanding infrastructure essentially means build more roads, build more airports, not really care too much about making your bus stands better, bigger roads, invite more cars and do not allow others, use the road as much. So those issues which are actually closer to development are not really looked at when we talk about economic growth as of today. And technology is a key enabler of our economic activity. And that is something which we need to understand that technology and economics is closely linked. The rate at which we grow our economy essentially means that we use our technology in all these different things to increase consumption, to increase productivity, to expand infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So I didn't talk much about productivity, which also I would like to make a comment on. So our productivity measures today are essentially linked to saying that how much is produced per person. And if you really look at the reason for increase in productivity, it is either technology or in a much bigger measure, increase in use of energy. So you will realize that, when we talk about workshops of yesteryears, go back 30, 40 years and you would have people, working on lathes over a period of time. Of course, the situation of people working on shop floors has improved correspondingly substantially, but it has come at the cost of using enormous amount of energy and associated side effects that we are not really captured so much. So let's look at if this is the situation, and if we say that there is something else that we can do, what can be a transition pathway? So let's look at where we are today. So this is where we seem to be today. So we are talking about economy, society, and nature, and economy drawing at a much faster rate, so that nature has become a subset, which essentially means that if we continue to do that, nature will keep shrinking, and at a particular point in time, there will be no inputs available to the economy for it to even function, and there is a potential of collapse. I think that is something that we need to clearly understand, that unless nature and economy are in good balance, unless in fact nature is larger than economy, which means that there are resources which are available and which will remain available for our economic system to function, we will not be able to continue this process indefinitely. So if we say that if we want to make a transition, we will of course will come to energy, but if we want to make a transition to something which is more sustainable, that we are able to live as a species for a much longer period of time, then we will need to make this transition happen. we will have to make sure that at some point in time, my economy is contained in nature. And of course, there will be different levers that are associated with this. So one of the levers could be, let me shrink economy so that it becomes less than nature. Now, this is something easier said than done, but can we actually improve nature? So I think all these levers have to be used together, and we'll also look at various levers that are available to us, later part of this discussion. So economy, society, and nature, if you really want to map, then the right-hand side picture, where we talk about nature substantially bigger than economy, is a desired state, simply because it will allow the economy to function over a long period of time. And hopefully, if this condition remains, then for in perpetuity. Now, the point that we have and we need to look at is today. Some of you might have heard this term, some of you may not have heard this term, which is called an overshoot day. Now, this overshoot day is the day in the year when your biotic resources or resources which actually can potentially be replenished are over for that particular year. So if you have a budget of, let's say, 100 trees to be chopped and used for wood in a year, I'm finishing off these 100 trees in first 7 months. And then I'm, trying to cut additional trees which are not part of my budget this year. They are part of my budget next year today. And therefore, I'm keeping on depleting at a rate whereby I am unable to replenish this stock of biological resources in good time. And that is happening today. So if we have to make sure that this 7 months goes to 12 months, which means that I will have to make sure that the rate at which I use resources has to be reduced to a level where at least there is a full replenishment possible for renewable resources. And then, of course, for non-renewable resources, the challenge is different. Non-renewable resources and associated challenges are both on sources and sinks. And the reason is that the sources could be a particular mineral availability, which can sustain use of that mineral over a period of time. We will have to include issues like recyclability or issues like circularity. That is one part of it. But second part of it, in the process of using these stocks, which are minerals, which are crude oil, etc., we are also creating externalities like CO2 emissions, and then the sinks, like the atmosphere, is not able to handle these excess pollution. And that means that you have nowhere to go. And then there are impacts like global warming and climate change that do happen. So that transition is something which is, we have to make it. There is no other choice if we have to really live for as a species for a long period of time. So I just wanted to spend some good time on this so that we have a full understanding of the transition, the mechanism of transition that is probably required. Let's look at some of the aspects of economic system. I have talked about it, but very quickly, we are talking about using more and more natural resources. The simple reason is that we want to see our economy growing year on year. So, for example, if I were a CEO of a company, then I would have to produce results and grow the company year on year. Even if I say that I grow the company, let's say 10% year on year, it actually lands up in exponential growth. And as I grow my company, I land up using more and more resources directly or indirectly. So that's the nature of our economic system. Nothing much can be done about it today, right away. But we will hopefully we'll find some mechanisms as we go further. It also means that you are increasing use of steel and cement production, which are the pillars of modern economy, all infrastructure. We cannot just get rid of these, and we'll have to figure out what do we do with that. accelerating use of energy as we increase our economic system exponentially. You are continuing to use and not just use energy, but using it at an accelerated pace. Our economic system is also structured in a manner where it drives us towards higher inequity. And we will look at a couple of charts which allow you to see the rate at which inequity has increased over a period of time. And in the last part, just to re-emphasize, the economic system is larger than nature, as you can see. Let's look at a couple of charts here in terms of wealth inequity in India. Now, this is a chart from 1961 through 2022. And now this gives you a idea about how it was in 1961. Probably the inequity was limited, but over a period of time, you will see that there is enormous inequity that has popped in. What does that mean? It means that as top 10, 1%, as little as 1% people, if you look at the wealth that is in the country, 1/3 of the wealth is held by just top 1% people. What 50% have a share of mere 6% of wealth. And top 10%, if you count, almost 2/3 of the wealth is held by top 10%. Now, this is the nature of inequity. And there is nothing, difficult to understand why this inequity happens in this particular manner. If you look at our current economic system, it is basically saying that, companies have to make profit. The profit has to be redeployed and the companies continue to grow. Now, this reinvestment in companies or fresh investment in new companies happens especially for those who can buy goods and not for those who cannot afford goods. And simply the gap continues to keep increasing. Look at income inequality. Now, income inequality has also increased significantly. You're talking about top 1% commanding 22% of income. Again, a fairly large, and top 10%, almost 3/4 of the income that is generated. A small percentage is available for bottom 50%. If you take, bottom 50% together, a mere 13%. Now, so these are the challenges, and these challenges are inbuilt into the way our economic system is structured. And correspondingly, an economic system and energy system, as I said, are tied to the hip, and therefore it also means that the way current energy system is structured, you will continue to see something similar. If nothing is done, nothing is changed. So let's keep looking at understanding the problem a bit more deeply in the next few minutes. So the social challenges include growing inequity. We just saw a couple of charts which talk about that. There are challenges which we see which are related to employment. And again, this is something which is not a surprise. As we see that technology and energy is used at the rate at which it is being used, it actually continues to do job that could be done by many people, maybe just few years, which essentially means that unless you produce far more, you will not be able to employ far more people, or you'll have to find a completely different way of employing these people, and therefore these employment challenges, what they call in the Western world jobless growth, will continue, which means that they are not commensurate. The rate at which you consume energy and the rate at which the economy grows is not commensurate with the rate at which the jobs grow. And this gap continues to increase. And that is an indication that, and we have to start understanding that that is an indication that, something is going wrong somewhere. So linkage of employment with energy and resources and employment challenges are, tied very tightly. you use more energy, you use more resources, put in more automation, you will need less employees for the same amount of produce. There is, of course, an argument that is made that, yes, people will do something else. Over a period of last several years, people have found employment somewhere or the other, which while it is true, it also means that additional employment will be at a cost of additional energy use and additional pollution and the impacts of those that all of us will have to bear. And that's something that again we need to understand clearly. New technology is very likely to reduce employment, net employment as I call. It will continue to increase energy use. Recently, over the period of last 1.5 years, we have seen that we have seen AI coming in a big way, and there is a fear even amongst the advanced nations that that is very likely to take away employment of maybe 50% of people over the period of next 5 years. And that is huge. Now, there will be new challenges that will emerge because of some phenomena of this kind. So, how to manage this aspect? Technology has gone into its own, become its own it continues to develop kind of on its own now. So there's nobody else required to handle technological growth. The technology growth delivers economic growth, creates more money. Money can be reinvested back into new technology, and it will continue to grow. We have talked about economic growth does not really deliver equivalent employment growth already, and then we will look at challenges which are related to energy transition. On one side, we will see that the those who have the rich of the world have as much energy as they want to their as their slave, but at the same time, those who do not have, they do not even have access to reasonable amount of energy. So there is enormous divide. As you see the divide in income, correspondingly, there is also a divide in terms of energy access and energy availability across the social spectrum. And that too becomes enormous issue, especially in the developing world. Now, these charts are telling. Now, let me spend a couple of minutes for those who do not know what are these planetary boundaries. So, planetary boundary research was done first at Stockholm Research Institute and by a researcher named Johan Rockström. In 2009, he published a paper, actually a seminal paper, saying that we keep looking at climate change, CO2, global warming as only one dimension, but there are multiple dimensions that we need to look at when we talk about, what are the boundaries, what are the constraints that we actually work in. So 2009, the biggest issue that you will see was aspects of biosphere integrity, which means the rate at which we were losing biodiversity was so high that we should have been worried. At the same time, the biogeochemical flows, which means that flow of nitrogen, especially via the fertilizer use, was a matter of concern because this was getting into oceans and water bodies and creating, acidic nature of these water bodies, and then correspondingly again implying that the marine diversity would therefore reduce further. And the third, which was relatively less compelling at that point in time, even while we already had identified that this is an important problem in 1992, was climate change. So that was the state of affairs in 2009, and there are other things which aspects which are I will just very quickly go through. Novel entities means that things which are completely new. They are not natural at all. These molecules did not exist, and our technology has created these, and these are all novel entities. The impact of that is unknown. And in fact, even today, Even by 2015, the impact was thought to be gray area, right? And then we talk about stratospheric ozone depletion. And if you remember, 1987, there was a protocol that was signed in Canada called Montreal Protocol between all the nations of the world to make sure that the ozone hole, hopefully, we should continue to reduce. And that was a fair success because that was one of the big problems in 1987. We were able to find replacement for chlorofluorocarbons, which were primarily responsible for depleting ozone. And therefore, we are even today able to retain this into the green zone. So let's switch to 2015. Now, from 2009 to 2015, there are some more elements added. So when we talked about biosphere integrity, we said that there are two parts to biosphere integrity. One is, how many different types of species we have, which is called genetic diversity. And second, which was called as functional diversity, which means that maybe out of 100 different species we have, there are only 10 categories and only 10 functions. And there are, few different species which actually are responsible to do the same function. And even if we lose a few of these species, the functional diversity can still be maintained. So we understood, at least at that point in time, that there was something more to biosphere integrity, and we need to look at what that is. Biogeochemical flows like nitrogen, which was a problem in 2009, phosphorus got added to this. And phosphorus again is a part of phosphatic fertilizers. And like nitrogen, that also started seeping significantly more in water, making water further acidic. We had algal blooms and we have associated aquatic, deaths and so on and so forth. Third thing that we observed in 2015 was land system change. And that again is a very significant part because land system change, means many different things. The reason is, one is, let's say we clear forests and start doing agriculture. That's a land system change. We stop doing agriculture and build towns. That's another land system change, right? And these kinds of encroachments into habitats of different types of organisms also has a potential to what is called as a spillover effect. And these organisms, like different types of bacteria or viruses, spill into human populations. A good example is COVID-19. And for that matter, if you track various viral fevers from 2000 to 2020, there have been at least 5 or 6 occurrences of serious viral fevers during these 20 years duration. Now, these viral fevers had happened in the past as well, but the frequency was far lower because your land system change was not as significant as you see here in 2015. So land system change has many implications. And of course, there was climate change, which was an issue. Come to 2023, which is just last year, and we see that, there is a lot more red in the system. So we started understanding that novel entities is a big problem. The molecules which never existed, nature has no mechanism to even, destroy them. And we have to figure out if we have to destroy them. And novel entities has become a significant problem. Climate change is slowly but surely going over the top. We are talking about, CO2 concentration and associated issues. And then there is a new, so there is a concept, there is a term called radiative forcing, which is actually making things even worse. Biosphere integrity becoming worse, as you can see, genetic diversity and functional diversity. So both issues exist, and these issues are significant. And being, one of the first indicators of something is going wrong, right from first study published in 2009. Then we come to biogeochemical flows, that has even further worsening effects. So the color red essentially means that, it is very bad. It is terrible. Yellow means that, it is going out of bounds. And green essentially means that maybe it is still in the constrained envelope and it's fairly safe. So today there are only three parameters which you will see are in the safety zone. One is ozone depletion, which has been under control. Atmospheric aerosol loading, which is slightly worsened, but it is still in control. And then ocean acidification, beyond the P and N, there are other factors which also add to ocean acidification, which is still seems to be okay, except for the phosphorus and nitrogen related aspects that I talked about. You will also see that freshwater use in 2015 was in green, and freshwater use in 2023 is now in yellow, in amber, and it's getting towards red. Freshwater, and it is actually also disproportionate across regions. If you really look at India, India has far bigger problem than rest of the world when we talk about freshwater management. We use a very, very large part of groundwater for our irrigation, right? So, and it's as large as 65 to 70% of the water usage for irrigation comes from groundwater. And unfortunately, there is no work that is not enough work that is done in basically replenishing our aquifers, which means that if we don't give enough attention to our water, we will lose a very large part of our ability even to do decent agriculture. Now, I'm going to go through 2, 3 slides somewhat quickly. Now, this particular slide is also very interesting and very telling. If you really look at the surface temperature of oceans and why it is important, if we are a very large part of Earth's surface is ocean, so it is water, and heat that is contained in ocean, the heat capacity, thereby amount of heat that can be contained in ocean is very, very large, and therefore the rate at which the temperature can rise of such a large body is very slow. But if you really look at the year 2023 and then the 2024 until around May, end of May, half of the year, you will see there is a sudden shift in terms of the temperature increase. Over the period of years previously, there has been a shift, but it's slow. But there has been sudden shift in temperature rise in 2023 and similar situation in 2024. So there is a fear that, have we tripped? The simple reason is that if the ocean is not able to absorb heat anymore, then it means that this heat is going to remain in the atmosphere, and the ocean cannot really, absorb this, which essentially means the total heat in the atmosphere is going to increase even more, and then the warming potential further increases. So that's why this is a little bit more concerning than what it was maybe a few years ago. Ecological challenges are enormous. We are continuing to see rapid land use changes. We are continuing to see that more and more land is turning barren, which means that we cannot even do agriculture on these barren lands. A lot of habitat destruction and continued increase in biodiversity loss. We also see that as we increase energy use, whether it is fossil fuels or any other intense form of energy, you will continue to see accelerating ecological damage. Now, one of the examples that I always like to cite is, when we just had an axe, a person could possibly cut one tree in a day, and then he would not be able to do anything more. But when we got access to a diesel chainsaw, he was suddenly able to start chopping maybe 100 trees a day, right? And that was because that additional energy that was available to him in terms of a fossil fuel or diesel to run the saw. he himself or she herself wouldn't be able to do that at that particular rate. So as we accelerate use of fossil fuels or dense energy, what I call, we will see that we easily accelerate ecological damage, and that they are, kind of directly related. That also damages ecosystem services, which means that, for example, if in a particular area, if there were a lot of trees and greenery, there is a service which is cooling service. So temperature regulation is a service. It is an ecosystem service. If we say that, we chop many of these trees and, build cement roads instead of that, then that ecosystem service is lost, and we just don't have mechanism to replace that in cases of this kind. And if we do replace, we are actually shifting the problem from one place to another. A good example is air conditioning. If we say that to cool, I'm going to use air conditioning indoors, I'm actually releasing more heat outdoors. And that means, I'm creating, bigger problem outdoors by just the act of using an air conditioner indoors. Now let's come back to some dollars and cents, right? So if we really look at the disasters, the climate-related natural disasters, it's also an economic challenge. Now, what is the cost of people? The projected cost of people in 2050 is, I cannot count the zeros anymore, right? So you have 12 zeros and 38, which is 38 uh, $1 billion in 2050, and that will be per year contribution that you would have to put in for managing climate related natural disasters, which talks about if you see continued GDP growth up to 2050, then 18% of that will be attributed to just managing natural disasters. And this picture actually is quite telling, and for that matter, you will see this Earth, and this system is kind of tentatively balanced, right? There is a potential that all these movements, on the left hand side, if we do not have enough wind, uh, it may not go on the right hand side. It will kind of fall back into a trough. If we want to go towards zero loss of nature, we want to go towards sustainable food system, zero carbon energy, circular economies, all good things, then we need many, many different things, right? So we need mass movements whereby people start adopting to a completely new lifestyle. We need a lot of political progress in terms of politicians understanding the importance of, how this can be managed much better. We will also need to see that there is a technological disruption which can bring back some of these issues back into control, and we'll talk about few of them a little bit later. And of course, market forces have to be aligned, and whether we need market at all the way it is also a big question mark, and we need to find answers for that. Now look at these two parts. One is the socio-economic trends, and the second is the earth system trends. And we will see, and it's very difficult to, it's not very difficult to see the cause and effect, right? We have seen world population grow, not because, we produce far more kids just like that, but it is really directly related to availability of resources, availability of food, and so on and so forth. Of course, after a certain stage, we have really seen that population control is actually people getting educated better, and that itself acts as a best contraceptive. But world population nonetheless has grown substantially over a period of time, putting a lot of pressure. Now, today, the population trends are such that if it continues the way it is, after 2060, we'll probably see starting decline in population. And so some of us, some of the folks believe that the population problem is solved. And maybe, considering that it's a 30-year window, nothing much can happen, whether or not you like it in terms of, where we are in terms of population. The point I want to emphasize is this population growth has meant that a lot of Earth system components and Earth system parameters have changed. There has been issues related to ozone, surface temperature of water and terrestrial temperatures, nitrous oxide increase, methane increase, and whatnot. I mean, all these aspects are directly proportional to the load we put on the Earth system. And again, it's not just about population; it's also about how much one consumes, right? So, growth in urban population also meant that the consumption has continued to increase. The primary energy use has continued to increase. Fertilizer, and these increases are not linear; these are exponential, and that's the reason for further worry. Had they been linear, we could have been done, handled better in terms of controlling these. But most of these happen to be exponential. Now, how does our energy system look today? Okay, so now impacts of scale and rate of energy use is what we need to be really worried about. Let's look at how does our global energy mix looks today. Let's look at how much of that is a solar component, which we can currently use as a proxy to renewable energy. We will also look at how much time do we have for a transition if we say we want to retain our temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and then maybe do a quick back of the envelope calculation for a 2 degrees Celsius increase as well. We will look at what is the nature of transition that might be needed, what is the time that is required. We'll look at increasing energy demand and corresponding fallouts, role fossil fuels have been playing and how they will continue to play some role or the other, and then how we see this from a social ecological lens as well. We will look at state of the assets and economics of transition, whether it is an impediment. We are talking about 275 billion in investments to 2050. If we really want to change, this trend in terms of how emissions can be potentially even captured or reduced, how we may want to transition to renewable economies and many other things. And then issues of stranded assets, which we'll talk about as well. So this is a quick pie. So if you really look at close to 81% of our energy comes from oil, gas, and coal, which are fossil fuels. Right? It's a very large percentage, and this is a 2021 figure, and it has not changed much. 6% comes from nuclear, small slice, 2% comes from hydro, and solar, wind, and other is 11%, of which a very large percentage is in fact biomass. The part of the other is biomass, and actual solar and wind percentage is somewhat smaller. And we'll look at some of these numbers as well. So look at this pie. Look at the total amount of energy that we consume, 600 exajoules. Exa is 10 raised to 18, and we'll also try to make sense of these big numbers in something which is more relatable in the next couple of slides, which is equivalent to 173,000 terawatt hours, right? Terawatt hours. So tera is 10 raised to 15, and 1 kilowatt hour is 1 unit of electricity that we use. For example, our refrigerator takes 1 unit of electricity a day. And now you can look at what does that really mean in terms of, and this is for a year, right? So this is year on year, we continue to consume this level of energy. These numbers, I'm just throwing these numbers just for you to get a sense, and then we'll try to relate, of course. But this is important still. Look at India. So these are numbers for India. Primary energy supply, 11,000 terawatt hours, which is roughly 6.5% of world's energy. I think these were 2020 figures. I think in the last 3 years, that 6.36% has become something like 8% of world energy use. So we are actually using energy at a much faster rate and started, accelerating it as well. Also look at the final energy consumption. So if we look at this final energy consumption and primary energy supply, you will see there is a lot of gap. And that gap is almost 40%, 37.9% of the energy we just lose. You can call it waste, but I call it loss of energy. It can come through efficiency, bad efficiency. It can come through loss in transmission, for example, which are also called transmission and distribution losses. It can come through various different reasons in terms of this difference between what I call as final energy consumption and primary energy supply. So it is like saying that if I give you 10 units of energy, I supply you 10 units of energy, the actual benefit that you accrue is only equivalent to around 6 units of energy. That's what the meaning of this is all about, right? And there is a split. Don't worry about that for now. Again, let's look at energy mix in India and the world. As I said, around 82% fossil, coal, oil, and natural gas. And if you look at only the solar as a slice for the world, it is as little as 0.57% as of 2023. A very, very small number, as you can see. For India, it is much better, or close to 3%, but it is still small, as you can see, in terms of in terms of the world situation, in terms of total solar energy that we contribute to the world, it is still very small. So we will realize that in 2023, 2024, we are still a fossil fuel world. So let's now look at what does that mean in actual numbers. So if you look at a total for 2021, we're talking about 173,000 terawatt hours. Solar generation in 2019 was 1,000 terawatt hours. It has grown at a good pace, something like 20-25% year on year. But that also means that maybe by 2024, we will reach 1,500 or maybe 1,400 terawatt hours. A very small number compared to what we really see from a world perspective. India total was 11,000 terawatt hours in 2019-20, and that time solar generation 2020 was around 320 terawatt hours in India. If we project it to 2030, we are talking about roughly 3% year-on-year growth in energy use for India. We'll get to something like 15,000 terawatt hours, and solar generation compared to that will be only around 900. That is expected, assuming that we meet all the targets. This means that additional need is close to 3,700. Additional estimated solar energy growth is roughly 600 terawatt hours, which means that there is a significant new gap in terms of energy that is opening up, close to 3,000 terawatt hours, which cannot be serviced by solar. And maybe we add wind to that, and it can even then we are talking about maybe 2,000, 2,500 terawatt hour. So new energy requirement, which cannot be serviced either by solar or wind. So I think that is something which we need to really understand, that the gap is continuing to increase in terms of how much energy we need versus how much energy we can continue to supply through renewable resources. So what are the insights? What are the insights that we get out of this data? So we really look at that our energy system is very large and very complex. The transition to 100% renewable energy, the type of plan that Musk had put forward in the short term doesn't look feasible at all. Just looking at these numbers and rates and etc. We will continue to use fossil fuels for a foreseeable future. That's a given. Now that means that we'll have to still figure out what to do with the carbon dioxide that is emitted using these fossil fuels. Our development models today is primarily based on economic parameters. So we are still not talking about direct well-being, even while there have been many social welfare schemes all the governments talk about and maybe continue to deliver some good stuff around that as well. But primarily, our development story is around economic parameters. And then our economic system is not in full alignment with our social needs. So we will, therefore, it looks like that we'll continue to see a bigger gap between the rich and the poor if we continue on the same path. And another important part is we are not even considering the ecological constraints. I think one of the good initiatives that India has taken, that they have started measuring five important natural resources, at least measurement, so that they want to know what is happening to these and are there new risks that are emerging. Unfortunately, that measurement is not become mainstream yet. It is not being related to GDP yet, and hopefully it will translate into some policy corrections over a period of time, but it is still early days. Some of the technologies related to CO2 abatement, carbon dioxide abatement, for example, direct air capture. So, capturing CO2 from air directly. These kinds of technologies, one, they're extremely expensive. They have enormous energy penalty, and these technologies are in absolute nascency, which means that they are going to take decades to scale. It's not something that's going to happen very quickly. And as these technologies are, you have to build out physical stuff. It is not like a piece of software once done, you distribute and you can scale exponentially. So these systems, new things that will try and abate carbon dioxide, for example, through technological interventions, are going to scale only linearly. And that's why, it's going to take time. What does that really mean? It also means that there can we use existing technologies for better near-term returns while we maybe continue to experiment with something new. There are existing technologies, which, for example, existing technologies which can capture carbon dioxide from dense streams, from power plants, from steel, from cement, etc. Can we really use some of these technologies even while they are a little expensive? But with due optimization, there are at least several configurations where that is feasible. So governments can support, industry can support some of these things whereby, we either do not emit additional CO2 because of that, or especially in the hard to abate sector, it is trying to, emit less CO2, therefore, or, and when I say hard to abate industry, it is primarily cement, steel, plastic, oil and gas, chemicals, etc., where CO2 emissions will happen, fossil fuels will be used, and there are certain industries which emit carbon dioxide as part of the process itself, like cement and steel. So this carbon dioxide needs to be captured in some other way by either the change in process or through means like what I said, carbon capture, and how you can store this carbon in one way or the other. Now, this is a very significant picture, and I think we need to be worried if we see a picture of this kind. Uh, if it when we are talking about 1.5 degree Celsius, so we want to limit our warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. What is the available carbon budget, right? And this carbon budget available is 200 gigatons of CO2. Now, what does that really mean? Actually, it means that currently we emit something like 40 gigatons of CO2 a year, right? 40 gigatons of CO2 a year. So if we assume for the time being that we will not increase this emission from today through ever, we still have around 5 years, maybe 6 years of time available to us to get to net zero, which means that after that, we cannot afford any emissions if we were to stay in the 1.5 degree limit. As all of us can easily see based on whatever we discussed previously, and what the math tells you is this is close to impossible. If it is close to impossible, can we actually do something to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius? Now, if we have to do that, we again have a budget of, give or take, 22 years. We have something like 22 years available. So what does that mean? 22 into 40. So that's 880, roughly 4 times this emission is allowed if you can retain your emissions within that envelope of 800 gigatons, you essentially you say that you have something like 22, 23, 24 years of time available to you to ensure that we get to a situation where after that we will not emit any further carbon dioxide. Again, we'll see that this period is still very small. As you will see that our energy system is very, very large. We are talking about close to 80% of our energy system dependent on fossil fuels. We also see that there are certain sectors of industry which we cannot shut down, like cement, like steel, like plastics, like chemicals, and that means that we will continue to emit. Unless we find ways to make sure that, somehow we buy more time, we reduce our emissions at a very rapid rate, we find a mechanism of sequestering carbon in various ways, only then, there is a potential to get or make sure that we use these 20, 25 years at hand in good measure and try to get to overall net zero emissions by then, which we see that it's very, very difficult. Having said that, let's also look at something which is more relatable. What does that really mean? What do you really mean as when you talk about 40 gigatons per annum of CO2 emissions, right? It essentially means that every year I'm burning down 45 billion fully grown oak trees year on year. So every year I'm burning down 45 billion fully grown oak trees. Oak tree takes around 40 years for full growth, roughly, and which is kind of equivalently, it will take something like one third a land area of India to grow 45 billion, right? So that's the level of destruction that we are causing by putting out this level of CO2 in the atmosphere. So I think this is just for you to relate to this number, like 40. What do you mean by 40 gigatons, right? So this is a number which will help you. So, if we look at this, our future looks not necessarily very bright, and therefore there is a need for a lot of action. So now next 30 minutes or so, 25 minutes or so, we will look at, I'll go through a couple of slides to define this problem a little bit further, and then we will go and look at what are the opportunities therefore in front of us. Also look at the economic issue of stranded assets. Now, stranded asset essentially means that I have built something using a lot of resources, a lot of money, and if I do not use it, all the money goes to drain. Take an example of a coal power plant. Now, there are a very large fleet of thermal coal power plants in India, which are less than 10 years old. And the typical life of a coal power plant is minimum 40 years, if not more. That means that these coal power plants will have to continue to run for next 30 years minimum. And that means that, and then of course, not just that, we continue to build new thermal power plants. We continue to, mine more coal. Of course, it is sensible that we want to be secure on our energy requirements, but at the same time, we also have to be worried about the undesired side effects because of some of these things. So you will see that it is economically unviable for India or China or many other developing countries to shut down any of these plants. Even assuming that we want to do that for good reasons, we will not be able to do that so easily. So the burden of that has to be taken by the Western world, and our position in our negotiations, climate negotiations, has also been that we need more carbon space because we are a developing country, and we will ensure that we will never cross the average emission that the world has. For that matter, we are around half of that today, average emission, maybe a little bit less than half. of average per capita emission, even while we as a country aggregate emissions is close to 6, 7, 8%. So therefore, what we need to do now, so we need to look at all three components together. We talk about taking an approach towards development, look at social, ecological, and economic aspects together in defining how development happens and how this nature of development can make a transition possible or at least plausible. Also important, and the second point is something which I really want to emphasize, is post-fossil fuel world is not really talking about replacing fossil energy with renewable. It is not just about that. Of course, we will need to do all that we can do to get more renewable capacities and more renewable energy generation and so on and so forth. But it will possibly be a completely different new energy repo. What does that mean? It essentially means that over a period of time, we have continued to increase use of energy enormously. From one person doing one person equivalent work to today, one person employing in some of the developed world close to 300 or 600 slaves. So 600 times increase in use of energy in certain parts of the world. On an average, instead of one person doing one person's work, we are adding energy equivalent to 60 people. So that's the nature of increase of energy that has happened over the period of time. But this energy, or the new energy essentially means that this is not feasible anymore. And if we do not do anything about it, we will land up in a situation that we will just do not have a mechanism, energy access and energy availability to continue. And therefore, we will need to decrease our energy consumption very rapidly and that seems to be a real pathway if we have to make these changes. We saw that if we continue to emit carbon at the same rate, we have very little time. So this particular point where we'll have to really struggle and find ways, how can we achieve reduction in energy use, aggregate reduction in energy use at a rapid rate, is going to remain very critical. And then we have many levers which have been talked about, that circularity, less material use, energy efficiency, and so many other things. So we'll have to essentially pull all the stops to be able to do that. Now, this particular diagram, the reason I'm showing this diagram is trying to show you something which you can see on the right-hand side, which is I marked with a golden circle. You'll see a figure of 67.3, and that's the percentage which is lost in actually getting from primary energy supply to energy services. Only 33% of the energy that we are putting in is actually useful to us. And that essentially means there is enormous opportunity for looking at extreme energy efficiency. So I think I just wanted to put that as important. Just to give you some other numbers, we lose close to 40% of our food. So our food waste worldwide is around 40%. And that essentially means all the energy that is put into making food or growing food, 40% of that directly goes to dump. And these figures are telling, which means that there is definitely an opportunity for us to look at energy efficiency as a key driver, a key lever of change. So now, I'm trying to combine all the discussion, all the learning that, we have talked about over a period of more than an hour into something. Therefore, what are the emerging opportunities? How can we establish new economic system? Now, we now fairly understand that our current economic system, if it works the same way, it's not going to take us anywhere. Now, how do we redefine the problem? And that's what I'm attempting to do, raise new questions, right? So we will start looking at different parameters. So instead of looking at saying that, are we building more hospitals? we will ask a question: are people becoming healthier? uh, Instead of saying are we managing resources, we will ask question like is nature becoming better, is my area under forests, for example, or under other important ecosystems becoming better, is nature becoming better, are we improving availability of biotic resources. That essentially means that instead of finishing in 7 months, can I now go to 8 months? Can I go to 9 months? Can I go to actually 12 months? When I say that, then we essentially mean that we have established renewability of biotic resources or biological resources. Are we reducing the rate at which we exploit our abiotic resources? Abiotic resources are mineral oils, natural gas, coal, iron ore, bauxite, all kinds of minerals that we're talking about. And so if we are going to start asking these questions and say that if these are my new parameters which should drive my economic system, how do I therefore structure my economic system differently? Then the second part is something which is we need to really quickly address: how can we really reduce emissions? How do we plan long-term reductions in use of energy? And of course, there are nations which are looking at policies to do that. But I think the time available to us is short, and we really need to act at a massive rate if you really want to reduce. And when I say improvement in energy efficiency, it's not just about energy efficiency. Now, I'll give you a very interesting example, which you will relate very easily. The term, very interesting and important term, is end use efficiency. And end use efficiency essentially means that let's assume that I want to go from one place to another 10 kilometers apart, right? And that means that if you really look at the basic laws of physics, then assuming that I weigh, let's say, 70 kg, then 70 kg mass has to move from one place to another place, which is 10 kilometers apart, and therefore it will consume X amount of energy, physical loss, right? And how much energy do we actually spend? For example, in our current ways, I drive a car and go 10 kilometers, right? I drive a car which might be, 3 tons of SUV, 3000 kg. So a 70 kg person sitting in 3000 kg car and moving it, you just look at the multiplier, right? Just look at the multiplier. The actual efficiency of fossil fuel, assuming it's a fossil fuel driven car, converting into kinetic energy, movement, etc., is close to 25%. So I land up only using 1% of total energy I put in for the purpose, which is my movement. So induced efficiency of a passenger car we are talking about here is 1%. Sometimes it's even less if you're talking about large vehicles driven by single people. And you will see, that is, and this is just one aspect. Well, mobility is just one example, and it happens everywhere. Take a case of light, right? And again, it's a similar situation. The amount of energy that I consume and the amount of energy that is utilized to deliver me light is again, less than 1%. And there are so many other examples where we essentially are saying that, we are continuing to really be, or we have found ways to be really inefficient. And therefore, this concept of end-use efficiency is very critical, and therefore, this improvement is very much possible by looking at things differently. The third part is, of course, a behavioral change. And if we can bring that amount, which is eliminate highly discretionary spends. So we go to a shop and buy anything, and 90% of the stuff we buy we never use. Now that doesn't really make sense. It of course it makes a lot of sense to the economy as it is structured today, but it doesn't make sense to the future of the way economic system should be structured. How can we reduce material use? Can we add material circularity? Can we look at green chemistry? Aspects such as cradle to cradle product design. So, can we create products for long life? Can we create products for repairability? Can we make sure that products need not be thrown away to the dump? Circular industry clusters. Can we make sure that the end point so-called waste of one industry becomes food for another. Can we actually, number one, reduce waste, and whatever waste we create, we use it as a resource, like in circular situations? Can we actually mine resources from the landfills which already exist, which means we will reduce pressure on requirement of new material and new energy? Intensity of end use services, I just talked about completely new business models whereby I don't ask for 18-watt bulb. I ask for I need 100 lumens of light, and if you can deliver it in 1 watt, fantastic. Now, if you need 2 watts, that's okay. So there is a potential that these models and how we ask for our end use services, if we change, our companies who deliver that, the businesses which deliver that will also change. Like Philips is changing. So they have started selling lighting and not lights. And of course, third is a suggestion where a mechanism of delivering these types of services, whereby saying that I'm not selling products, I'm selling services. Can I deliver it? How do I enable it? So can I have an enablement mechanism to do that? Now, bigger challenges are related to these big industries like steel and cement and plastics and chemicals, where carbon capture and utilization technologies are emerging, where you are actually capturing the carbon dioxide and utilizing it in a circular fashion for chemicals which require carbon as a resource, as an input, for example, right? That's utilization. Again, this again can be done at a very small scale, but still useful. Storage is going to be important and unfortunately required. It means that carbon dioxide and this storage potential across the world is fairly large, even while it is not developed as yet. Take an example of India, right? So India is expecting that by 2070 we will end up emitting 185 gigatons of CO2. We do have an estimated capacity of around 250 gigatons of storage potential. This is for example, saline aquifers, or for the wells that have been completely dry now, oil wells that have been completely dry, etc., etc. So the point I'm trying to say is, there are possibilities whereby we can buy more time. We talked about 22 years and 24 years for under 2 degrees centigrade. We can potentially buy more time for transition, but transition actually will have to happen with all these levers pulled together. Other aspects of opportunities are going to be distributed generation and distributed use. So we actually generate where we want to use, thereby trying to avoid these losses in the system. We also can use local available resources and materials for local available requirements of energy. Quickly running you through carbon captures, utilization and storage. What does it mean? I'll not spend too much of time because it kind of starts getting technical. But what we are saying is there are ways in which you can capture technologies from gases which are emitting CO2 from industries. We can move these to places where they could potentially be stored, or to places hopefully very close by where they could actually be used and converted into useful chemicals that we can use. The techno-economics for this is fairly complex. The cost of carbon is captured is high, but then you have other and interesting midway solutions. Such things like blue hydrogen, which essentially means that you can create hydrogen in the process. Many of these industries as a kind of a byproduct, and this is not green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is produced by electrolysis of water, where electricity is supplied by renewable energy. But here you can still get a lot of hydrogen, which is at a much reduced carbon dioxide emission. Therefore, it's called blue hydrogen rather than gray hydrogen. And it can improve the viability of use of hydrogen as well, and so on and so forth. So there are many different levers that are available. How can we change the way we create new jobs, right? So we have been talking about many of the new jobs that we see today in the current system are energy intensive. So we are talking about jobs. So can we move, for example, to creating energy intensive job to jobs for restoration, for repair, for refurbishing, for remanufacturing, and so on and so forth, which do not require a lot of energy, which allows existing assets to be used for a much longer period of time, and so on and so forth. And there are jobs which can bring back nature, increase the pie in the diagram that we saw initially, and of course also the corresponding, at least the biological resources. And then there are opportunities in bioeconomy, where we are talking about moving towards renewable resources, ensuring the scale of resource use is limited. And so, I mean, there is this term that people talk about is moving from hydrocarbon economy to carbohydrate economy, just to give an interesting twist to bioeconomy, the name bioeconomy. Agriculture needs to be climate resilient. So we will have to, apart from saying that we have to reduce CO2 emissions, we will also need to look at that in the face of these increasing emissions, what can we really do? How can we make sure that our food production can still happen? How can we change the ways we do agriculture? Right? So agriculture has to become resource efficient, agriculture has to become climate resilient, and of course, we'll have to continue to look at restoration of ecosystems so that they continue to deliver the ecosystem services associated. So I think we will probably be closing in a couple of slides, and then I'll be happy to take questions. So basically, we need to understand the context, all three dimensions, social, economic, and ecological. We need to understand the real needs of society. Like I said, that my real need is going from here to there. My real need is not necessarily driving a car. Aspirational needs are a little bit different than real needs. My real need is being able to read and not necessarily, using a 100-watt light bulb. Understand the needs of life at large, as I said, understand the needs of nature, and not just humans. We are overly focused on being human centric in all our development models so far. Unless life persists on earth, humans cannot persist, and that's something that we need to understand, appreciate, and use that understanding in our system transformation efforts. Exploring this economic system transition really, really seriously. I mean, we continue to say that, this is, yeah, I mean, you're talking about utopia, right? So the point is that we have to talk about that and figure out how you make this transition happen, rather than saying that, nothing can be done. So there are possibilities. I just, tried to bring forth a few of them, but I'm sure that there are many more, which, many of you might be able to uncover. Drastic innovation and primarily trying to decrease the need of energy. And that is, I think, where that's the biggest lever that we can try and use in going forward. And then this is a very interesting directive, which is called public luxury and private sufficiency, whereby it essentially alludes to saying that do not duplicate infrastructure. If you have, most of the nice things available for masses, everybody will not really aspire to build them again. Everybody will not aspire to build them again and again and create enormous redundancy and therefore enormous strain on resources as such. Embracing new business models, we have talked about it, and work closely with governments. I mean, we try to essentially say that, governments are not doing it right? But I think we'll have to figure out how to work with governments of whichever way. How can we align with their manifestos and, still do the right work at the implementation level? It is not good enough to just say that, this is not the right government. Whichever government it is, right or wrong, we will have to figure out how to make some of these things right, whichever way we can. Integrated planning, adaptive management, include resilience in thinking, and of course, a lot of stakeholder engagement are going to be critical for this transition. Systems thinking and not thinking about just small buckets is going to be required, global cooperation, a lot of innovation. As I said, innovation has to be looked at in different ways. Social structures, aspirations, technology, business model, how we manage our ecological systems, and so on and so forth. And in summary, I think I'll leave this for you to read. It just captures few important points that we talked about. So I'll close here. And if there is, we still have around half an hour for any questions that might come in. So I will close here. I think I've taken a lot of time. 1.5 hours is a lot of time for all of you to keep listening in. But I hope that you are able to understand the challenges, the complexity, and possibilities as far as energy transition and therefore economic transition that we are talking about. Thank you.
So we are open for questions, Ajay.
Yeah. I think we can open for questions.
So I request to raise hands so that we can, follow a queue. Yogita, you can go ahead.
Hi Ajay, thanks for the lovely session. I just have one short question. You mentioned somewhere when you were talking about the ecological constraints that the good news is that India has started measuring at least 5 of these constraints. So can you just mention what are these 5
So
constraints?
these are mineral resources, that is crude oil, coal, iron ore, forests, and water. So these are the 5 that they have started measuring since 2019. 2026, by 2026, it is expected that 16 states out of whatever we have would have reasonable amount of data to so that we start understanding the rate at which we are depleting resources to gain GDP.
Okay, and is the data open source? Is it?
It is open source. You can Google GASAB,
Okay.
Which is the body which keeps track of this.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Urvi, you may go next.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, Urvi.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding like now since like it would be little foolish to say that technology should be avoided. Like I do understand like policy level interventions are needed, and with technology like I want to understand, is there like are there any resources or research available which can measure the impact of the the technology like humans have created, which are little which are overused, for example like cars and everything, and in comparison to like the impact that it is having on the climate change right now, or the like impact on the nature it is having right now, and what would happen if these are minimized and the use is minimized.
Have the broad numbers, Urvi, right? So, I mean, I gave you example of, the really, really poor efficiencies of some of the technology, the way they have been deployed. I mean, technologies are not bad in themselves. It's actually how you use them becomes an issue. So technology can potentially be neutral, but the way we as humans use them is a challenge. So if we are able to put these technologies to use very well, I think we will do a good job. So for example, some of the complex problems where we wouldn't have been able to solve ever can now be solved very quickly with technology, right? So if we use it for solving these social, ecological, economic problems, I think it's good use of technology. Instead, if we say no, these things are going to create, more stuff, then it's a bad use of technology. Yeah. Yes, Manish.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, hi, Ajay sir. Nice, very nice presentation and good insights. I mean, lots of good food for thought. One question, or rather, two questions which I had. Uh, is you were pointing out that the energy generation and energy consumption. I mean, there is almost 33% of energy consumption. I mean, efficiency is only 33%, and that's a huge number to look at. So has there anything done on this front? Anything which we should be looking at within India or outside India? Any use cases wherein any tries have been done to improve the efficiency? And secondly, this efficiency of around 33% is steering a car
Yeah,
and a person sitting in a sorry.
Yeah, Manish, I'm not able to hear you. Last 30 seconds I lost. So you're talking about this 33% efficiency, and then I lost you.
Sorry, I'm losing you. But I hope I'm audible. I just wanted to say, are there any use cases wherein the improvement in efficiency is tried by anyone? When you're saying 33%
I gave
percentage
you
of
some
efficiency,
examples. Manish, I gave you some examples as to how one can really improve the efficiency by orders of magnitude, right? By changing the way you look at the end use, right? So if all of us who work on in the technical fields understand this concept of end use efficiency far better, then we will be able to address some of these issues. But I mean, it is just one lever, right? So there are many different things that need to be done. And considering that this data is available in public domain, I'm very sure that a lot of scientists are also looking at this in terms of what can really be done. Yeah, but if you want some specific use cases, we can meet separately and we can talk about it.
thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. Yes, Santosh.
Fantastic presentation, Ajay. Basically, the topic we had was energy transition. And what we all understood from the presentation was energy transition, most importantly, leading to economic transition, which means ultimately lifestyle changes, lifestyle transition, the way industry works, the industry, transition in individual use of energy consumption, all these things. So ultimately that leads to mindset transition, and that's the biggest challenge, like how to simplify this complex, uh, all the thoughts and the kind of actions needed to the masses, so that they understand the severity and get into the transition process.
Think that's where we are going to need a lot of help. People like me can only look at numbers and say what these numbers say, but we will need a lot of people who are able to translate that into something which can be delivered to people, and people starting to understand and relate to that. A lot of work needs to be done on that, and we will. And you're right that it is not just about understanding, but how to translate that into something that works on the ground, right? And for that, a lot more needs to be done for sure.
Right.
Ajay, there's a question from Akshara in the chat.
Yes, let me just have a look. And there are few questions. Okay. Okay, there are few questions. So I will try to answer them one by one, Akshara. So one is India economy is poised to be number 3 in few years. That means more consumption, but this contrasts individual efforts to reduce energy usage. Can you suggest 3 high impact measures at individual level? Actually, I can suggest that based on my own experience. I'm not sure whether everybody would like them or not, but those can change, reduce maybe energy consumption close to 50%. One thing is, of course, change your mode of transport. If you can use a bicycle, if you can use a public transport, that changes it substantially. I gave you an example of 2 orders of magnitude change that can happen on efficiency just by changing the way you commute, right? So that's one example. Other example is again that drastic reduction is not buying things you don't need. So that's also, so everybody of course says a need, but when I associate need with use, even simply speaking. So many of us keep purchasing things which we just don't use. And if you just can avoid that, that also is a very significant possibility. In countries like India or countries which are relatively warm, it is easy not to use hot water. Again, changing that makes a lot of difference. So these 2-3 things are very easy to do, according to me at least. And if we look at that, there's definite potential for significant reduction in personal level. And of course, there are many more which, of course, we can list down, but these are a couple of them. Another question you had was related to solar and wind need a lot of metal using leading, etc. So it is correct to an extent that we still need mining. We will still disturb some of the ecosystems, but I think all of our efforts is actually looking at better trade-offs. Let us understand that there are no silver bullets. We are looking at better trade-offs, and this is probably a better trade-off than continuing to use fossil fuels, right? So the way we are using currently at the scale and rate that we are using these fossil fuels, yeah. So I hope I've answered your questions.
Do we
Yeah.
have these figures of the trade-offs?
Sorry, come again? Yeah, I think there are. For example, the energy payback figures on most of the renewable energy technologies are available. You can easily get them. And so, I mean, compared to fossil fuel, what does it mean in, let's say, 20 years? So you can easily see some of these figures. Yeah.
Yeah, one is mining, other one is the whole manufacturing process itself.
Yeah, so it is basically all of energy that goes into making a solar panel and how much energy we can potentially get back. Of course, there are other issues as well. It's not just about energy, it's also about ecological disturbances. Somewhat difficult to put value to those. Today, even while we can value ecosystem services, it is, we are not valuing loss of biodiversity. We are not valuing. So, if we put in aggregate, it is very difficult to, answer this question. But if we look at it in energy terms, they are probably a little bit better trade-off than fossil. Yeah.
And one more suggestion was there, which I follow. Maybe I can share a photo also.
Sure.
What I've done at home is the first question of reducing the individual level energy usage. I have put the exhaust inward. And so
Actually, that's a very nice suggestion, and it's a
I've been doing
doable
it for the
suggestion.
last 10 years. Maybe I will share the photographs.
Sure, perfect.
And I don't have AC at home. And I'll tell you, especially Pune's weather, around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, I had to take blanket even in summer.
Yeah, wonderful.
In
So
this,
I think that's a great suggestion, because people feel that air conditioners, no, there's no choice. But I think this reverse exhaust is definitely an interesting, interesting
I'll
way.
share the photos the way
Yeah,
I have it. It's very easy. You don't have to do anything. You just not even fix it. You just have to even hang it in the window. Also, it helps a lot. It's just
perfect.
and 1,000 rupees, and even
Yeah.
the energy usage is also hardly 100 to
Well,
rupees per
yes.
month. So
Thank you for sharing this. And I think if you can share with a photo, etc., I'm sure that many who
yeah,
can
and
adopt it very quickly.
yeah, and one question to all of you, because
Yeah,
many of the urban planners are also there in the group, and architects and all that. I myself, I stay in Aund, so I have noticed in last 10 years, the urban heat islands (UHIs) have increased quite a lot because all the societies and everything is paved. So that is another reason for AC usage. In my society itself, 10 years back, nobody had ACs, but now in last 5 years, everyone is having. So
So let me now get to Farida's question. Thank you, Akshara, for sharing some of the insights. And of course, we can continue the
yeah,
conversation later as well.
the UHI
Uh,
we can talk
yeah,
about.
sure.
Thank you.
So, Farida, you have a question on, isn't there a danger that if we get better at carbon storage in the transition phase, there is less incentive to reduce the rate at which we consume energy? Yes, the simple answer is yes, it is possible. But we have to, understand this caveat that number one is it is not something which we can do very quickly. It is going to take some time. There is going to be a lot of effort required to get there. And again, even the carbon storage has a limitation, right? So we have only limited capacity, right? So limited capacity in terms of how much carbon can indeed be stored. So that's, I think, the response that I have for you. Uh, Thoughts on exponentiality of renewable energy generation. I think, Manish, you have a very relevant question. And that's why I said that, one of the biggest levers that we have is figuring out how we can reduce our energy requirement by order of magnitude, or hopefully orders of magnitude. And, that's the real lever. And of course, to satisfy that level of energy, we use renewable energy. But this whole aspect of exponentiality of renewable energy technologies, I think this percentage will not become major. You can put in, how the rate at which we are growing, right? And continue to put into a math and say that what happens in 6 years and what happens in 20 years. And you will see that, yes, there is a potential, but there is a limitation, right? So that is my response to you, Manish. New white rocks or geologic hydrogen trapped. How can this be revolutionary change? Actually, this is one of the levers. This is also called, I think, white hydrogen, if I'm not wrong. I have not studied this to any great extent, but this is one of the levers that I do know which is available. Having said that, handling hydrogen is non-trivial, and hydrogen replacing the level of energy that we use today or need today is not very easy. It is extremely hard at best.
Thank you.
To sequester 1 MT of CO2 requires 40-50 full-grown trees. India produces steel 180 million, etc. Yeah, I think I cannot do the math right away, but I will use this data and try and give you answer. I think Google Pixel 7, I don't know who that is. There is a question here, some data presented, and a question that, what is that?
I'm Shirish Barve.
Okay, Shirish, tell me, what is that you want to say?
That is what I have put up. It is Google Pixel.
Okay. All right. So I will anyway look at this data and try and see if I can get some answer to you. I don't think I can give you a real-time answer.
There's one more question, Ajay. This is from Prasad. Is degrowth the same and integrated approach being talked about in the context of economic growth? And how do we drive energy literacy in our country or for that matter, extend it worldwide?
So degrowth is not necessarily the only integrated approach, but degrowth is an important. I mean, Herman Daly has provided some, very interesting ideas in his idea of degrowth, which is anyway very interesting, critical, and important part of what we all discussed today. In fact, Dalit calls his economics ecological economics. Having said that, he just talks about steady state. Degrowth is something which is coming in slowly but surely. But degrowth doesn't necessarily mean that you do not have the type of services that you enjoy today. Maybe, as I said, that you will enjoy it differently, but not necessarily, you will have to give away everything that you do today or you enjoy today. So that's why, degrowth is not necessarily in terms of reducing economic size, but most importantly, trying to decouple resource use and economy. Right. So that is a critical aspect that I would like to emphasize. How do we drive energy literacy in our country? I think it's a difficult question to answer in a couple of minutes, but if interested, we can discuss this separately. We can always, discuss that separately.
Bipasha, you have a question?
Just a minute. I'm looking at more questions here. Ravindranath has asked a question. What can we do to reduce T&D losses? I think one of the key things is, or one of the things that we can do is related to distributed energy generation and use. Right. So distributed energy generation and use is important. That way we reduce the need for transmission and therefore we can limit losses. Part one. Part two is again very difficult to explain in a couple of minutes, but I will send you a link of an article which will help you understand how we can use available energy better, and that thereby reduce the need for energy. Yeah, so that's for Ravindranath. So Parul, if you can, just keep a note of this, that would be good, so that, we can follow this up with whatever different people have asked for.
Yes.
Now, Bipasha. Yes, Bipasha.
Hi Ajay. A very basic question is that on carbon capture and storing, one is reusing, which is great, but one way where you put the carbon underneath the earth. So as you mentioned, you can put it in dry oil wells or saline aquifers, but these are not natural processes. So, is there any study on whether it impacts ecological study on whether it has any adverse impact, like capturing carbon and just putting it in places where it never used to be?
Right. So I can give you a little bit of response on that. So for example, if I use this CO2 and try to bury in saline aquifers are shelves in oceans where it actually becomes part of so there is a chemical reaction and it becomes a carbonate. And that means that it is sequestered for a very long time. And it will change a little bit of geology, but it does not seem to have affected any of the life below sea. So at least, one portion, which is actually a much bigger part of potential for sequestering, is saline aquifers. And the second part is putting CO2 back into depleted oil wells. Now, depleted oil wells, already had oil at one point in time. And now we are replacing that oil with CO2 under a little bit pressure. Because CO2 is a gas, and because we are not able to cool these petrophores, there is a potential that there will be leakage somewhere or the other. But the extent of leakage versus extent of storage that is available, I think storage is still a plausible option. I hope I have given you some answers.
Yeah, Ajay, just another quick question is that are these only two options for storage, or do people kind of now store anywhere?
Not really. I mean, these are the predominant options for storage. And of course, there are others which are in process. So, for example, if you talk about steel slag and put carbon dioxide in steel slag, you can convert slag into cementitious material. Now, again, there the carbon dioxide is locked. Carbon dioxide can also be used for curing cement, and you actually can get better properties of cured cement by CO2 curing. Again, carbon dioxide is locked. So there are some other ways of storing CO2, but I mean, the bigger ones are these two which I talked about. I mean, use depleted oil wells or use saline aquifers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One last question, Ajay.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any data which talks about EV technology being energy efficient?
So, if we really look at purely from an efficiency standpoint, electric vehicles are efficient than fossil, even assuming that the energy is generated using fossil fuels. Okay. While there is one extra step that is involved, the actual conversion of electricity to movement is highly efficient compared to the way you convert chemical energy in fossil fuels to kinetic energy. So at that level, there is that efficiency that is available. But more importantly, EV essentially assumes that eventually the electrical energy that they will use will come from renewable energy. Whether it is through solar energy, whether it is solar or wind or whatever that delivers energy to the grid, and we will use that energy. So assuming that we improve the energy mix, the effective efficiency of electric vehicles will improve. So I'm just giving you a technical answer. I hope, Aparna, you are okay with this.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
need
fine.
anything.
Yeah, got it. But actually, I was trying to understand a comparison between the ion battery technologies which have come up, like lithium ion is one which is being predominantly used. So whether the other technologies which are there, like sodium ion and zinc ion, which are upcoming. So are there any data in terms of number which are available about the energy efficiency point of view? That is what I was looking for.
But I have not studied this in any depth, so I won't be able to answer this.
Yeah, you have rightly pointed out it. Anyways, thank you. Thanks a lot. Nice talk, sir. Thank you.
So if there are no more questions, then we can wind up. I think giving you 3 minutes back.
Yes, Ajay.
Thank you very much for your patience, because being patient for 1.5 hours technical subject is not easy. I mean, it's very difficult to keep your attention. So I really thank all of you that you spent all of these 2 hours to listen in. If you have any more questions offline that come to you later as well, feel free to send them out on the Ecological Society email address, ecological.society@gmail.com. and I will attempt to respond to those as well. All right, so we can